Welcome to the Belcultassi Podcast with your host, Lee. And today we're going to be talking about Gnosticism. And we've got a very special guest, Cyd Ropp Ph.D. from Gnostic Insights. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here. And for the audience benefit, if you could give us a little bit of your background or your origin story, you can take as long as you need, just as an introduction to warm up
Okay, thanks.
the podcast.
All right,
Thank you.
just a little bit. Um, so I've always been interested in spiritual aspects in God. I had my born again experience when I was only about 5 years old. I've been practicing yoga since I was 8. Uh, I'm very interested in dreams and dream interpretation, and I do that. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I have 2 master's degrees, one in education and one in counseling. And then I have a PhD in what's called classical rhetoric, which I had never even heard the phrase before I enrolled in the program. And it means that I am trained in how to read ancient manuscripts. And at the university level, that was basically Greeks and Romans. Because it was a secular school. If I'd have been a classical rhetorician in a Christian school, I would have been reading religious texts, but I wasn't. And so my specialty at the PhD level is worldviews. And my dissertation was about the trial of a midwife who was a traditional midwife, non-medicalized home birth midwife who refused to go into the medical system. So she was not a registered nurse or working under the auspices of a doctor. And that's what got her into trouble. So I looked at the trial of the midwife and I separated the witnesses into conventional and traditional. And of course, the conventional people won because law and science and medicine, they're all on the same side. And
Sure.
traditional women's ways or spiritual praying at a birth is not part of the normal thing. So anyway, so that's my background. And I've taught college level some, I've taught university some. I was a bed and breakfast innkeeper for a number of years, and I'm a very good cook. And so that's about it. And then I've been writing books ever since I stopped teaching. Teaching took so much preparation and so much grading of their papers that I didn't have time to write. So when I got out of teaching, that's when my own writing began.
Sure. Yeah, so you've got a number of books. Do you want to list them now or
Oh yes, I will hold them up for visual experience. Can
excellent.
you, is that focus? This is called A Simple Explanation of Absolutely Everything. How come that's out of focus? I don't know
Oh,
why.
yeah, I can
Anyway,
see it. I can see it. Yeah.
okay. So, and you can find all of these on Amazon, basically. This is a theory of everything. This is what is called a true theory of everything. It doesn't mean I know everything. It means that I've got a framework in which to analyze other people's particulars.
Sure.
So it's like the skeleton of how things go together and the knowledge of the universe, basically. And then I discovered Gnosticism after writing my simple explanation of absolutely everything. And I had to put it down for a few years because I'm a Christian and it worried me. It frightened me. And I didn't want to fall into heresy or fall into wrong teaching or anything. So I actually put it away. And then I brought it back out after about 4 years and studied one of the books in particular out of what's called the Nag Hammadi scriptures. And these were a cache of papyruses, rolled up scrolls that were buried in the desert of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and dug up by a farmer plowing a field in 1945. It's like magical. It's like something from a movie, but it happened for real.
Sure.
And inside of those scriptures, that forms what's called the Nag Hammadi codices, and you can buy those books online or you can go to gnosis.org and they have them all printed out for free you read them online. And
Sure.
the book that I gravitated towards, Lee, was called the Tripartite Tractate. And tripartite means three-part. Tractate simply means book.
Sure.
And it had no other name. So that's what the scholars called it. And it was one of the books. I don't know if you know this, because I didn't know this, and I was a psychology major and a master's in counseling. Did you know that Carl Jung, actually purchased one of the scrolls, and he was the one that had it translated out of the original Coptic Greek directly into German? And so he was actually reading Gnostic texts back when he designed his transpersonal psychology. And it turns out that Jung's system of transpersonal psychology and his archetypal figures and his transpersonal consciousness, which is, like our exterior shared memories and whatnot, that's all Gnostic.
Yeah.
It's all out of, in particular, the Tripartite Tractate. That was the book he bought. And I love that book. And it's very Christian because it does have the figure called the Christ, although the Christians, your conventional Christians, they think it's no, get thee behind me, Satan. They think it's heresy, which is why I put it down at first as well. But it's not. It's the truth, I think, that was stripped out of the Bible back during around 300 AD, when the emperor and the pope got together and they decided to make it a manageable religion that they wield power. So they took the explanations out. And that's why nowadays so many conventional Christians think it's all a mystery. Oh, well, it's a mystery of God. Well, it's not. It's in the Tripartite Tractate. And so that's what I've been developing. So my second book, or my first book in the Gnostic realm, is called, see, for me, that's totally out of focus. It's called The Gnostic Gospel Illuminated. It's a very short book, and it's along the lines of like a spiritual poem, the way the Tao Te Ching is. So they are short, aphoristic phrases that build the story of gnosis. And then finally,
I can put all of this in the show notes in the description. So
okay, right.
Don't worry
too
much.
To worry about focus. Okay, thanks. And so my current book, my new one, is called A Simple Explanation of the Gnostic Gospel. So I melded my simple explanation theory of everything with the Tripartite Tractate. So I'm using my theory of everything framework to interpret the Gnostic gospel. And that part is unique because no one else puts these things that way. And the Gnosticism that I'm teaching out of the Tripartite Tractate, aside Christ as a central figure that's very important, it's not the same as what's called Sethian Gnosticism. Most people who are calling themselves Gnostics nowadays, or who are studying Gnosticism or watching Gnostic podcasts or listening to them, they're Sethians, and their primary figure. So we have certain things in common, but certain things different.
Yeah. There's
one basic myth. The basic myth is that there's an ethereal plane, and there's these entities called eons, Aeons, up there.
Yeah.
And that one of them, the most wonderful one, fell, overreached and fell, thought it was God or whatever, and fell. And that fallen state is our material world. So it has all the blueprints of the heavenly realm that we do remember, because it's a transpersonal psychic phenomenon that we remember it. We are called those of the remembrance.
Yeah.
And all living things have remembrance. It comes along with life. So when the egg is fertilized, life comes down from the ethereal plane, remembrance of our ethereal origins, and the knowledge of love comes down from the ethereal plane. The Sethians call the figure that fell, they call her Sophia, and it's a female character.
Yeah.
I don't just Sophia. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just from my background in the esoteric, I was always it was always explained to me that life is an experience of forgetting and remembering, and history is pretty much the story of forgetting and remembering. So when humans go through phases of forgetting and then remembering, and that's the life experience, the duality between the two opposites of forgetting and remembering.
Exactly. We are those of the remembrance. When we're born, when we're fertilized and first born, we remember. We have a direct connection still with the ethereal plane, but then we forget it.
Hmm.
And it's due to the what's called the never-ending war. And those are the dialectics. A major part of the never-ending war is material versus spiritual, is material versus ethereal. But another part of the never-ending war is thinking that we've got to be tops. We've got to be on top. We always want to win, win, win at any cost. And that's a war. So we go to war with other people, and we go to war with everything, basically, at the
Yeah.
personal level, interpersonal, and at the national level. So,
Steiner
but I
referred to
was
it as
saying,
the Rudolf Steiner referred to it as the war of all against all. I think
yeah,
he was tapping
that's why
into
it's the
that.
never-ending war, and we can't win because it's a never-ending war. It will, and we have been unable to reach a state of steady state remembrance, which I suppose is what we would call enlightenment. And there aren't that many enlightened people. So if you are thinking that you need to become enlightened to return home to the ethereal plane, it's never going to work. A million reincarnations isn't going to get you there because it's so incrementally small. And then there's all the backsliding, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's kind of thing that goes on. So that is why we have a Christ that takes it upon itself to bring the remembrance, to bring the forgiveness, to purify us so that we are pure enough to stick the landing in heaven when we pass away. And I can talk about that more in detail, but you're right. These are universal themes. So any great philosopher or great theologian who has a realization of what's going on, they understand these things, but we all have our own point of view. I'm located here in this body with the things I have learned and the things I have observed, the things I have experienced. And that is my point of view. We're all monads, that's called. You're a monad, I'm a monad, everybody's a monad. So we have our own point of view, and we're only able to express truth to the extent that we have experienced it.
Yeah.
So people like you and me, Lee, who are polymaths, we are generalists. We look at all kinds of teachers and all kinds of scriptures and all kinds of science and history. And we say, well, where are the commonalities? Why is this person saying what that person's saying? And then we are able to translate it. That's what I do. That's what my simple explanation of absolutely everything focused on was the commonalities between all traditions, whether they're political, cultural, or religious. There are commonalities expressed by our points of view.
Regarding the polymath, I didn't know what the polymath was until about the age of maybe nearly 40 years old, maybe 35, between 35 and 40. So I spent the early stages of my life feeling or thinking that there was something not quite right with me. And it wasn't until I realized that the likes of Leonardo da Vinci and others were what
Yeah.
would be called polymaths. Because, for instance, whenever I could be shown 10 things, and rather than me straight away identifying the differences of those 10 things, straight away I would see the commonalities. They'll jump out at me, the commonalities. And then I learned through business that there's a technique called mapping, where if you've got 10 documents, you lay them out. If you lay them on top of each other and then look down, and then you see what is in common.
Yes.
So you end up with, instead of 10 documents, you could end up with 3 documents because of the commonalities
Right.
when it's compressed. And that once I had that, that was almost like a not an awakening, but it was definitely a realization of yeah, of my condition.
Well, that's very interesting. The way I approached simple explanation, I went up and up and up. So it's like you laying the 10 documents on top of each other and if you go up what's called a meta level, meta, if you go up a meta level, then you see that they're expressions of the of similar concepts, but just in different language. So my explanations go up a level in order to generalize what I'm saying. For example, I have this thing called the simple golden rule, where you could put up that slide if you want to. The simple golden rule I developed out nation. However, I use it very much with the Gnostic gospel. The simple golden rule was the way I extracted what all religions have in common, basically. And I say that I have already gone up a meta level. So instead of saying people, instead of saying human beings or cells or particles or societies, instead of using those particulars, I go up a level and call each of those a unit of consciousness.
Yeah.
Units of consciousness. You're a unit of consciousness. I'm a unit of consciousness, but so is every cell in my body, its own unit of consciousness. So when I'm talking about people, also think of it as being a cell. And I like to use skin cells as an example. Mm-hmm. Units of consciousness hold hands metaphorically with each other. That is, they link up with others like themselves. So skin cells link up with skin cells. People link up with people. Trees link up with other trees and become a forest. Skin cells become a skin. People become families and societies. They always link up and work together on projects for the common good.
Oh.
That none of them can accomplish on their.
So it's like a fractal scale, like a zooming in, zooming out. It was often described.
You always level up.
Yeah.
Yes.
We
exactly.
We contain the whole cosmos inside. We have the whole cosmos.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a Gnostic concept that is one of those that's considered a heresy by the Christians, is that you do have God inside of you. In fact, we okay. When I think of myself, it's not just me, Cyd. I am comprised of all of the units of consciousness that make up Cyd, down to the particle level. So, and by the way, in the simple explanation, when I wrote that, I was at that time what you'd call a panpsychic. I thought that everything had units of consciousness. So when you read the simple explanation book, which is about 15 years old by now, everything that links up, because see, subatomic particles all link up to become particles. Particles link up to become atoms. Atoms link up to become molecules. Molecules link up to become elements. Elements link up to become mineral aggregates. Yeah. But if you notice, it's all those things link up with others of their own kind. And so I thought they were self-driven. But now I always had a bit of a problem. It was always stickler, the difference between the mud level, that is the dry, rocky places, all those minerals I was talking about, and life. Life is qualitatively different. It's not just quantitatively different, it's qualitatively different. And before I became Gnostic, I didn't have the link between them. What makes this mud life into meat? And so that's what the tripartite tractate brought to me, was exactly how that link up goes. And the tripartite tractate is a very special book as far as being a spiritual book. Years ago, around the time of the New Testament, it feels to me like it was written earlier than the New Testament. We don't really know who wrote it. There's no claim. They say Valentinus, but they don't really know that. So the tripartite tractate, and I think why Jung liked it so much, it's more of like a science book. It's more of a physics book to me, because I study science and medicine and so forth. So it's more of a physics book. It tells you exactly how these things happen, how the mineral level, why it's mineral and dead, and then what the jump is, and how the melding between spirit and mud occurs to make life. And then all living creatures above are all what are called second order powers. And we all have the life, the love, the remembrance, and the sensation that we don't belong here. Something wrong with this place. How come there's death and destruction? I'm so upset. Why do people fight? Well, why do we have those expectations? The only reason we have those expectations is because we come to from a better place, and we're going
Mm.
to a better place where those things don't occur. That's all the fallen state.
Yeah, this was always, I always had a burning question as a child. And especially from probably about the age of 6 onwards, I would always just look around and observe the absolute absurdity of life. It was very clear to
Yeah,
me from a very young age that things weren't quite how they should be, and life
right,
didn't seem to make any sense. And I always had this burning question of like, why are we here? Where are we going? And there's got to be something better than this. There has to be something that is more functional than this.
yes,
There's something, there's something
right,
definitely off with this place.
right.
And
And
then,
that's the
then,
remembrance coming.
yeah. And then as you get older, you're kind of almost coerced into conforming, into burying those questions. And you think, well, okay, if I just go along with the mainstream of life, things will work itself out. Now, of course, it doesn't. And
Right,
those questions come back with a vengeance.
exactly. And if they don't come back when you're alive, they're going to come back after you're dead. And we'll talk
Sure.
about that later. More toward the end of the episode, we'll talk about what happens after we die. But hey, should I go give you the basic cosmological run through how gnosis basically works? What
Sure.
we're talking about?
Yeah, I want to assume that the audience watching this podcast have very limited knowledge of Gnosticism and maybe have just are new to it, or they maybe have come from other forms of Gnosticism which doesn't make sense to them. So this is one of the reasons why I reached out to you and decided to do a podcast together, is because from what I could see, you brought like a fresh approach, a way of simplifying it, and also this polymathic way of dealing with these big questions. So yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, great. Okay, so uh, in the beginning, I usually like to begin in the beginning because one of the things about this Gnosticism that I teach, which comes directly out of the tripartite tractate, if you want to read it for yourself, it's a very difficult book, and most people skip over it.
Sure.
Of course, I was drawn to it. So anyway, uh,
Is this one?
in
Is
the
this?
beginning, well, that's in a little bit. Yeah,
Oh,
that will be
okay,
coming in a
okay.
minute.
I'll take this away.
So let's not stop there. Let's not start there. Okay,
Sure.
hold those. Uh, in the beginning, we assume consciousness is the basic state. Consciousness is the ground matrix out of which everything else comes. And this, of course, is the opposite of the scientific viewpoint. Do you know, even today, scientists, especially neurobiologists, they think consciousness is a byproduct of the gray matter. They
Sure.
think consciousness arises out of the meat. And this is one of the reasons why they can mistreat lab animals, because they don't even ascribe to them any consciousness. You
Yeah.
know, they're all just, reactions, horrible stuff. So this flips that. And I say it's marvelous that this is 2000 years old. This isn't new age by any means. Consciousness is the ground state. That is the source. That is called the Father. Then the Father has a particular thought. The Father is, it's all those things you think of as God, being illimitable, immeasurable, ethereal. There's no such time as time and space. Nothing happens. It's just the great consciousness. It's like a meditative state of the Buddha. It's got no thought, only consciousness. But out of the consciousness comes a thought. And that first and only, and this is why they say the only begotten, the first and only emanation of consciousness out of the Father is a monad, a point of view, and that is labeled the Son, Son, in Gnosticism. And we won't get on to why is it not the mother and the daughter, but let's skip that for now. That's another discussion.
I was going to say
But
the term the father, because some people get hung up on this because it's this kind of patriarchal figure,
I
and
know I was trying to
especially
skip that.
even in Christianity. But even within my own practice and study through the lens of the fourth way and Gurdjieff, there's this kind of always the term the father is used, but for me that's more of it's more of an issue with language. It's not a case of it
Yes,
just being a masculine.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, because there's no gender. There is no gender in the transcendent. The
sure.
God does not have a penis. There is nothing like that. The only reason I use I'm comfortable with the phrase the father. Well, one, it's what everybody's familiar with, so I want them to know what I'm talking about. But it's also that the father emanates. He does thrust out. He doesn't receive. There's nothing to receive, which would be the feminine. He extrudes the son. And the son could have been called the daughter. It could be called the mother of 10,000 things, because no sooner had the son become self-aware that it's now no longer the father, and the father and the son are looking at itself and going, yeah, cool. Then the son broke itself out into all of the differentiation or all of the variables of infinity. It's infinitely, now it's got size because it's a monad. So it's a large monad that has every variable, every possible thought of the father, whereas the father's just kind of this amorphous. The son breaks itself out, and that breakout is what's called the all.
Yeah,
And I picture it like the rays of the sun, because the sun itself I picture as kind of a spherical gray cloud. And then within the confines of the sun, so they're coexistent, breaks out all of the variables. And now there's a million rays or an infinite number of rays of the sun. And those are the rays of the sun. The tripartite tractate says, well, the father didn't want them just to be constituents of itself with no knowledge of themselves. It was always God's will that the emanations would become self-aware. So
yeah,
no sooner had the variables, the all emerged, each one of the variables became self-aware. And by the way, I call that ego, but it's not a negative thing. It's merely
yeah,
an address and a designation and a name. So as soon as the eons became self-aware, they sorted themselves. They were not placed into a hierarchy. Here, this is your job, and you shall be called stuff. It wasn't like that at all. They sorted themselves. They fell out of this and became a hierarchy. That which you can possibly see back there. That's the hierarchy of the fullness of God.
yeah,
You might have that as one of your slides to show. So the hierarchy is a hierarchy, not because the ones at the top are so much better than the ones at the bottom. It's simply that the ones at the bottom, there's way more of them than the one at the top. It's that higher, the fewer, like I was talking about in my simple explanation of absolutely everything. Okay, that is the hierarchy of the fullness of God.
yeah,
And it's a hierarchy is always pyramidal shaped.
mhm,
Hierarchies are shaped like pyramids because they go fewer as you go up higher.
yeah,
And the ones at the bottom reach out and hold hands and level up. And that's smaller. Like there's fewer atoms than there are particles. There's fewer molecules than there are atoms.
mhm,
There's fewer cells than there are organs. There's more organs in me than just me being a single organism. So you see, every time you go up a level in the fractal sense, it's the higher, the fewer. And
this takes us back to the quantity and the quality, right?
yes, every time you level up, it's a different entity.
Yeah,
So in my scheme of things, that blue area down at the bottom, that's the material level. And then the green, that's all the life. That's all of us having come in.
organic
We are
life.
the second. Yes, that's the organic life. And then above that are the eons and the fullness of God. And then up above that is the sun and the all sitting there. Okay, you can take that slide away if you want.
Sure.
So so every time, so all of us living things are units of consciousness. Even our cells are a unit of consciousness. They're all alive. And there's a great video out on YouTube that I watched years ago called the Inner Life of a Cell, or The Secret Life of a Cell. I can't remember exactly what. You could find it on my YouTube channel because I linked to it, which is under Cyd Ropp, simple explanation videos. But a cell is an extremely complicated ecosystem. It's not just a cell sitting there. It's got all kinds of parts and communication and things that walk and things that move and things that pass from my cell to your cell. It's very much like us. And within each cell, they also have their unit of consciousness, and they've got their ego. I'm a little skin cell. My name is Fred. My neighbor skin cell is Charlie, and this skin cell is Mary. And our job is to hold, and we're very proud of being skin. And then skin becomes a unit of consciousness itself. See, this is all developing as the zygote develops. The skin cell, the skin says, I am a skin cell. I am skin. I hold the organism together. I am in communication with all the other organs, with the heart and the kidneys and the lungs. And so they are at their own level, the level of the organs, and they're all aware, and they've all got egos because they've got names, places, functions, duties. That's what the ego is supposed to be.
Sure.
And we go on and up, and then we come to this huge level where we have the impression that this person that's sitting up here on top, Cyd or Lee, is the only thing alive in this body of mine. And I can treat this body any way I want to because it's my choice. It's my body, my will. Well, it's not. You are simply basically the king of a universe of consciousness. So when I picture my body, I don't see it as me walking around. I actually picture that hierarchy, that pyramid. And it's just my consciousness sitting there on top, but it goes all the way down. And everybody is just as important as everybody else within your body. And that is why it's important to be good to your body, to be kind, not just so you'll be healthy or live longer or be virtuous in how you eat. It's because you are the god of a universe, and it's your responsibility to take care of this body and to love this body.
Yeah,
isn't that interesting?
It's amazing when you consider that we really don't acknowledge ourselves anything further than who we think is our personality. We don't ever really appreciate our nervous system, immune system, our organs. I practice a technique of sensing at different levels. So, for instance, sensing the feet. You know, we're completely disconnected ordinarily from the sensation of our feet. Now, when was the last time we actually said hello to our bone marrow or our blood circulation or our respiratory system? And to me, having a relationship with yourself is knowing thyself. That is the call, to know thyself, to make friends with oneself.
Yes, that's great. I'm glad you do that. That's a great meditation technique, to pay attention to the various parts of your body and talk to them.
Sure.
When I not my dogs a few ago and knocked out a couple of teeth right there on the roadside, and then I had a funeral for the teeth when we got home, and we bid them farewell, and we felt bad for them. And then when I had to get titanium implants in those places that had gotten knocked out, the whole body greeted in, welcomed the titanium teeth, even though they're metal. So that puts them in the mud category rather than the meat category. We thank them for participating in this body. So that's a very good thing. Now, as far as ego goes, you brought up ego. We humans, when we are born, we have a full remembrance of the fullness of God. We know where we came from. And I know that we have a full remembrance because every culture, every human has this, they may have forgotten it temporarily, but at some point in your life, you remember of how things should be. You have a feeling, a vision of paradise, and that is a singular space. That's that colorful that's that colorful hierarchy that we looked at back there.
Mm.
Basically, what heaven looks like, which isn't how we picture it, but they sit and dream. See, they are consciousness that dreams. And we basically come from the dream of the consciousness of the eons of the fullness of God.
Mhm.
And so it's very much like when we dream at night, you know, we don't, we think going on and that we're really interacting and so forth, things are going on, but it's more like the holodeck. There's nobody there but us. But
Mm.
out here, we do have others. It's called solipsism if you think you're the only one in the universe and everybody else
Yeah,
is a projection of your imagination. That's not true. That is a fallacy.
sure.
Because, of course, that sort of solipsism would allow you to do anything to anybody else because they don't count. And that is basically what sociopaths think.
Well, this is one of my concerns with this kind of trend with the simulation theory. And I know the simulation theory is heavily linked to Gnosticism, where basically nothing is real, so therefore you can do what you want. It does this whole idea of the simulation that we're living in some kind of false reality. If it's if we're not careful with that, it can lead to forms of solipsism. Many years ago, I did some research into psychopaths and serial killers, and
Yes,
one of the things that they reported when they interviewed them, when they were honest, they would actually say that they felt like it wasn't real, that they were in some kind of video game or some kind of simulation. So it enabled them to enact these horrendous things to other human beings or other creatures. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think it's an important point that you bring up that there are others in this experience, and
Right.
the other is an important factor. It's in fact, it's without the connection or the interconnectedness or relationship with the other, something other than ourselves, then it all comes to nothing.
Exactly. Exactly. And it doesn't bring peace, happiness, or joy. It brings darkness. And that's what happens when ego is out of control. So we're all born with a one self. Each unit of consciousness has each cell, each me, each organ, everything that levels up, it has its own place, function, name, etc. It is a unit of consciousness that is both egoic, that is with the place and function, and reflective of the one true self of God or the Father or the All. I generally relate to the fullness of God the most. That's who I tend to talk to nowadays. But it's your ethereal self that's supposed to be sitting on the throne, not your ego. When your ego sits on the throne, then it's all about me, me, me. What can I get? What can I do? And in its worst expression, it becomes sociopathic, where you think ego is all that exists and to heck with everything else because it's just me, me, me. So gimme, gimme, gimme.
Mm.
That is ego out of control because the ruling unit of consciousness at this level of this human here is letting it run the show. So, and or one of the organs, a lot of times people let certain organs run the show. So, people who allow their sexual organs to define who they are, it is the ego of the sexual organ that's sitting on the throne. So they're getting laid in bathrooms at airports, whatever, right?
Sure.
Or the person who puts their stomach, their digestive system on the throne, they have eating disorders. They can't get enough because the purpose of ego is me, 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 me. It gimme, gimme, gimme,
Mm.
which just piles on the food, et cetera, et cetera. So every body organ group has the potential of taking over your body,
But this
rarely for
whole
good.
yeah, and
Yeah.
this whole function of the ego, uh, and this is how I was, or it was taught to me, that the function of the ego is more on the level of survival. So it caters and panders towards survival. So that's why
Well,
it's me
well, it
orientated.
is. See, here's the thing. As above, so below. That's one of those maxims of Gnosticism, runs through all strains of Gnosticism. As above, so below. So we can infer what goes on in the fullness and the eons by what we see down here, or we can infer from the eons what should go on down here. At the aeonic level, that are sitting up there in the gold space, their ego isn't about me, because their major focus is always upward on the Father, the Son, and the Father, and the whole, the fullness as a whole. They are all for one and one for all is their motto.
Yeah.
I said that. That's not in any of the religious books, but it's certainly in the Three Musketeers.
We use that saying in the groups. So the esoteric groups that I work within, and that is the main differentiation between those that remember and those that forget. So for those who've forgotten, it's about me. Those that remember, it's all for one and one for all.
It's for the all. It's for the all, and it's brought together by that simple golden rule, because the true job of ego is to know who your neighbors are. That's your position, place. It's to reach out to those. It's to work together. That's selfless love and putting others for the good of the all. Whether that's the good of the family, the good of the town, the good of society, the good of the world, or the good of your body. It's never about one unit working on its own. When it is, that's ego. And by the way, at the cellular level, do you know what it's called when one unit of consciousness decides to put ego first? It's disease. It's cancer.
Yeah.
It's it run rampant and trying to take over the whole body, and it kills the organism. So we work together with love, with information, and with actual assistance to work on a project that's in the middle that will benefit all of us. And in so doing, it levels up and builds something that wasn't there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
That is the true function of ego.
Yeah.
But down here, it's all about getting what you can get, but that's wrong. That's not right.
Yeah. One technique I've found very useful over the years to regulate the ego and to keep the ego in check is what we call the 3 lines of work. So the first line of work is work on oneself. Second line of work is the work that you do with others. And the third line of work can actually be just an extension. It could be the group, it could be your village, it could be all the way up to the cosmos. So it's anything other than self and other. So if you make a decision and it only caters for me, then it's probably not a healthy ego decision. Whenever a decision is made, we have to regulate it and make sure that it's conformable to all 3 lines of work. And if it is, then you give yourself a green light to proceed.
Wow. That's wonderful, Lee. I never knew this. This is from Gurdjieff.
Yes. Yeah. Gurdjieff. Yeah. And the fourth way. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Well, maybe I'll have to read some Gurdjieff.
I recommend it. I'm going to be biased, but I do recommend it.
Yeah. Well, and no wonder you like my my work, because it does resonate what you have been taught and what you practice.
Yes, there's lots of speculation. Although Gurdjieff was very secretive about the origins of his information, there's a lot of speculation. And I can clearly see that a lot of the stuff that he used was from Gnosticism. It's very evident, very clear to see. And along with the likes of Rudolf Steiner, in fact, pretty much all esoteric or contemporary esoteric teachings and a lot of the occult does have its Gnostic origins.
Right. And that, by the way, is generally on the Sethian side, the Phoenician and Egyptian influence coming through. In that big jug I told you was dug up out of Nag Hammadi.
Sure.
Most of it, by the vast majority of it, is and Phoenician religion teachings and the mystery cults. So I think that's where they got it from. Very few of them could be called Christian or what is called Valentinian. And there was even some Plato in there. There's some Greeks in there. So Plato had a lot of truth to teach as well. Okay, let me get back to the story. Can I get back to the cosmic rollout?
Yeah.
So we've gotten so far. Okay, so we've gotten so far as the fullness of God, which is shaped like a pyramid. Oh, and by the way, in my imagination, that's why the most ancient structures on Earth, the pre-flood structures, really are pyramids, because they're all replicating the fullness of God. They were built by the mystics who were channeling the fullness, basically. So it came out, so their structures came out looking like the fullness, which is a pyramidal shape. And I don't, mine just happened to look like that. I'm not into the pyramids and Egyptians and whatnot. I, though, notice that the higher the fewer always comes out to be a pyramid. So that's why my things all look like pyramids. Anyway, so the last eon to become self-aware that was sitting at the top of the aeonic stack in the Gnosticism I teach, his name was Logos, or Logos, some people say. I learned it as Logos. In Sethian, it's Sophia, a female character. I don't like the Sophia myths because it's, to me, a fractal extension upward of the Adam and Eve myth. And as we all know, that makes women the evildoers of the world and cause the fall. So I'm cutting all that sexism out by my saying that the Logos that fell was not a female character. Of course, none of them had sex anyway. But you see, the Sethians, they bring sex into it. They think that all of those Gnostics believe that all of the eons are part of a syzygy of a male-female pair, and that they're all married up there, so to speak. I don't think that's a fact, personally. So my eons are not married. But anyway, so here's the thing. Logos had the best of intentions before he fell. Oh, and the thing that was so special about Logos, and this is very important to our fractal story. Now, are we assuming that everybody knows what a fractal is, Lee? We've been throwing the word around.
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I would,
okay. All right. So fractals, are infinitely, they replicate upward and downward in scale, but it's always the same thing, replicating upward and replicating downward. You can drill up or drill down. With the math, it's infinite in both directions. In reality, it's practical. Like broccoli is such a good fractal. Especially Romanesque broccoli. It's such a good fractal. So just look at the broccoli fractal. I've got a broccoli fractal demonstration on my YouTube channel you can check out. But anyway, you can figure that out for yourself. So here's the thing. The thing that made Logos so special to be sitting at the top and considered he was the last of the eons that came to self-awareness was within the body, or pleroma. Pleroma is another word for congregation, or set, S-E-T. It's a body of. The thing that made Logos so special was he carried within his pleroma a fraction of all of the other eons, a fractal level down or fractal level up. So Logos within his body replicated the entire fullness. And he was sitting up there at top all by himself. So he had no neighbors, his left or right. When his ego went to reach out, there wasn't anybody there. All he saw was the Father above, because he was at the tippy top. So Logos decided, hey, I've got the fullness of God inside of me, forgot all of his position, place, and duties, which was to stay fast and sit at the top of the fullness. And he launched himself to rejoin the illimitable, ethereal Father, which is not possible to. The Son is the only one that can plug into the Father without being annihilated. And so in order to prevent his annihilation, instead of going up, he went down. And that's why it's called the fall. It's not simply a metaphorical fall from grace. And it's certainly not Eve handing Adam an apple. The fall is when the eon that was at the top failed in going up and went down. He broke apart. He smashed apart. And all of his pleroma, I think of them as having rolled out. I think of them as blue. Yeah.
Could I just ask a quick question? So the New Testament scriptures and their sort of version of the Christ story, where Jesus says that the only way to the Father is through me. This would be this is the correlation.
Yes. But the Son, it turns out, here's another heresy. The Son and Christ aren't exactly identical.
Mm.
In Christianity, they've been lumped into one character, but
Yep.
in the original Gnostic version of Christianity, they are basically two characters, because the Son is the Son and the fullness are the first order of powers. They're the first to emerge from the Father. We live things, and I haven't gotten that story, but we living things are the second order of powers. The Christ is called the third order of powers. So sequentially, the Christ rolled out much later, although there's no time, so it's only sequential.
Yep.
And the Christ was basically put together, was formed by the Son and the fullness and logos after the fall and after the humans failed to do their job, because I haven't got that far in the story yet, but our forgetting is us failing to do the job. Our putting ego first is us failing to do the job. So it was determined that a third order of powers had to now be sent to save us. See? Mm-hmm. So he is yet a third order of powers. That's why he's half human. He's half second order and he's half first order. And that's what the fully God, fully man part is. So he came to save us. Well, okay, so getting back to the story. Logos breaks apart. That's the blue part. That's quantum chaos. That's the quantum chaos after the Big Bang. Or, yeah, I know it's trendy now to think there was no such thing as a Big Bang. I'm a scientist. I've always thought there was a Big Bang. I don't know. I haven't seen proof otherwise. So in my conception of things, Logos splatting apart and having his pleroma crushed is the quantum foam. Has no rules, doesn't know who it is. It's lost the golden rule. It's not working according to any plan anymore. It's bubbling in and out of existence.
So is that the same as like a potentiality?
Yes, it's somewhat, although it doesn't have the potential for life because it fell out of life.
Right. Okay.
We get to potential. I've got a whole theory on. See, I've got an answer for everything. I laugh at that pretentious title. Anyway, Logos was dead. He was horrified. It's in the tripartite. He was horrified. And by the way, this is one of the reasons it caused me to put the Gnostic teachings down for a few years, because John 1:1 says, in the beginning was Logos, and Logos was with God, and Logos was God. So the New Testament still retains a vestige of this Gnostic story that I'm telling you now, but it doesn't go on to say, and then Logos fell and became Satan. It doesn't say that part, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what? Logos fell? No way. So anyway, Logos was horrified. He tried and tried to stuff the pleroma back in, and he couldn't get it back together. So he literally abandoned the fall. He abandoned his egoic part, and the true oneself fled back upward. And since he's fractal, all the oneself part of him fled back upward to retake its position. But he's tethered to the fall because his ego and all his pleromic egos, that infinite number of, they're down here. And that then you can show the mud video or slide, because it's the mud that is the broken, fallen part of the eon known as Logos. Now, the Sethians, they've got a whole extra layer of mythology having to do with Sophia giving birth to a monster and Yaldabaoth and this and that and the other thing. But I think that's part of the Phoenician and Egyptian mythology, and I don't think it necessarily belongs. Okay.
Sure.
There you have your quantum chaos. That's the rolling around egoic parts of Logos, abandoned below. Then a personality, the evil twin of Logos, or we could call it the psychopathic ego of Logos, stayed down below. It was abandoned along with the chaos. And it had a personality. It was the ego. It was the thing that overreached. Although it was no longer plugged in, it no longer remembered. It's called, in Gnosticism, the Demiurge is called uh, the forgetful God or the amnesic God.
Mm-hmm.
It had the blueprints. It had everything that the pleroma of Logos had, but it's no longer linked up to the spirit of the Father or the spirit of the fullness or the Son of God. And it doesn't remember where it came from. It wakes up in the midst of chaos now and thinks, hey, what? Where am I? Who am I? I must be God. Yeah, that's it. I'm God. I'll build the universe. And he builds that universe that Logos was trying to bring to God. He builds it all on his own, but without the will of God. So that's when the quantum chaos levels up to particles, atoms, molecules, elements, and minerals. And boom, turns out that's the highest the Demiurge can go. That is the difference between the elemental side or the mud and life or the ethereal side. The mud is the pleroma of the Demiurge. It's called the deficiency. It's called the imitation. It has no golden rule. And the molecules that make up our body are the mud.
So we can call this service to self.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's all egoic. Now go to the next one that shows meat. This is the mud, the pleroma of the Demiurge, which is the fallen Demiurge. The meat is the pleroma of Logos up above. And it decides to send us down. Here we are. We're the cleanup crew. We're not doing such a good job, but we're the cleanup crew. So metaversal consciousness, which is what the simple explanation calls it, we'd call it the Father. The one, it all comes down from the top. Consciousness, life, love, the golden rule. It all comes down from the top down, and it infuses, it melds to that demiurgic level of the molecular. Because there is one in one of the books of the Nag Hammadi, the Apocryphon of John, it describes a little story where God, which is really the demiurge, and his angels, which are really called archons, kneel by the riverbank, and they keep trying and trying and trying to build humans, because in the demiurge's mind, he remembers these bipedal figures walking around. He remembers trees and flowers and birds, because that's all from the paradise memory. And he's trying to build it, but all he can build are rocks. He can build planets and stars and gas, but he can't get anyone to get up and start walking around. So he's kneeling by the riverbank, trying like hell to bring this thing to life, and he can't do it. And then life is breathed in, but he doesn't realize it's actually coming from Logos rather than from himself. So when the spark of life comes into a fertilized egg or seed, whatever the thing is, because all second order powers, everything that's alive in the cosmos, so it may be just Earth, but they use the word cosmos, so it's probably all of the universe. Everything that's alive is carrying the organization and the consciousness of the eons of God down into this universe. And I ran across a very interesting quote. I want to share this one to you. Let's see.
Should we keep this slide up or?
Not necessarily. Where is the one? Well, it's a good quote too. It's hard looking up quotes when you're live on a program. Okay, listen to this. Verse 98 of the Tripartite Tractate says, to those who belong to the remembrance, that's all second order powers, however, he revealed the thought of which he had stripped himself. And so this is Logos. He stripped himself of his ego and abandoned it below. So again, to those who belong to the remembrance, us, he revealed the thought of which he had stripped himself with the intention that it should draw them into a communion with the material. So the restored pleroma of Logos up there, it remembers the fall because the ego of Logos is still down below. So Logos is still in contact with everything down below, but he's also sitting back up on the pleroma. So he is also in contact with the Father and the fullness. It says we were fruited by Logos and the prayers of the fullness of God in order to bring remembrance, consciousness, and love down below. That's all in the Nag Hammadi, in the tripartite tractate. So we are the fruit. We aren't the pleroma of Logos. We're an iteration. We're another fractal. We're the fruit of the pleroma of Logos. So we're an iteration down from the fractals that are up in Logos, but we carry all of their countenances. We have their names. We have their faces. We have their jobs. Yeah. There's a second order power for every first order power. Now, it might not be us people. I mean, there's second order, all the flowers and grasses and dogs and cats, everything that's alive is a second order power. Well, they're all up there and they've got their eons that look like them. All of our cells, the components of ourselves, our mitochondria and all of that, that's probably at that lower level of the eons in the fullness of God because they are foundational and they level up to become the bigger things, right? So all of that is remembered by Logos up there, by his, because he's still in connection. So he fruits us down here to bring that remembrance to this otherwise dead world. And the hope was that it would remind the ego of the Demiurge that he's not God, that someone else is creating life and that he can't create it. So we are supposed to bring the remembrance of God into this universe in order to lift the Demiurge back up into the fullness. And when that happens, then the material world will roll up and end.
So we're the solution.
We were. That was the original plan, but we have failed because of the never-ending war, because of our egos, because we carry that reaching for transcendence that See, here's the thing. We're half material and half ethereal. So it's not just, so we have a tripartite nature, a three-part nature. We've got our ethereal oneself that each unit of consciousness that I and everything throughout my body has. We have our psychological level, which is basically our self-awareness and our ego. That's our psychological level. So spiritual, psychological. But then we have that material level, which isn't us at all. And it's not from the fullness of God. That's demiurgic. So that is what gives rise to these compulsions and impulses and egoic behavior, because the demiurge only knows ego.
Yeah.
He only knows me, me, me. And so our molecular part wants, and it keeps infecting our better natures with its demands. And so, shall we go on to the third part?
Yeah, I've noticed you've got a saying, onward and upward. So,
oh yes.
So this is connected to remembering the onward and the upward to look up.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Well, that's the after death part. I'd rather get to the Christ part and then the death part.
Okay. Yeah.
So hold that thought.
See, that's
because I do sign.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say.
Well, I was just going to say. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's referring more to the sort of soul trap type of situation. Is that correct?
The what?
The soul trap.
The what?
What people they call the soul trap. So after death.
I don't know that. Oh, soul. Oh, soul trap.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's that British accent got me. Yes. Yes, we are trapped. We are trapped, but it's a trap of forgetfulness, just like the demiurge is trapped. So now instead of just having the demiurge stuck down below, we second order powers did not cause him to remember God. So now we are also trapped, melded to the demiurge. So a third order of powers was needed. And this one is got all the mojo, all the mojo. It is greater than the first order of powers. It is greater than the second order of powers. It's infinitely greater than the Demiurge and the archons of the fall. The third order of powers, also known as the Christ. So that's where Christ is in. And the Christ, the reason it's got all the power is because after we failed, or it was obvious we weren't going to make it, the first order of powers and Logos and the Son of God, all three prayed together, and the totalities of God. That is even the all sitting there before it differentiated. See, the Son has still got the totalities of the all within it as undifferentiated parts of itself. So you've got the all, you've got the fullness of God, you've got Logos, and now you've got the blessings of the Father. All of them were praying to the Father, help us. We can't do this. We can't do this. They're not doing it. It's not getting done. Let us get back. We need to get back. And so the Father blessed this entire production called the Christ. And that is third order of powers. He's not exactly the same as the Son, as we've been taught in the New Testament. He's not greater than the Son. He just sequentially follows the Son. And at points in the tripartite tractate, it does change the word Christ to Son, because he is like the Son. And he's basically sitting on top of and coexistent with the entirety of the fullness and everything that's going on up there. He's sitting right up there with the Son. He's the Son, I guess, enlightened, if the Son needed to be enlightened, which he didn't, but he's the greatness of the Son. And so here's how it works. This is so cool. And it took me a couple of years of Gnostic study to realize this, but it is in the tripartite tractate. Say it's a difficult word to express. Oh, you can see one of the cats up there in the picture, above the picture. He's licking himself. Okay. Anyway, the cat tree's behind the screen. Yeah, he's upwards. He's up there, man. So here's the thing. The Christ, there's a third order of power for every second order of power, just like there's a second order power for every first order power. So we're all fractals. We're all nested upward and downward. And the third order power, there's a Christ for every one of us. So when Christ comes, Jesus, by the way, who was Jesus? Jesus was a second order power who manifested the third order powers. He was the first one to do that. He was an exemplar of what we can be, which is also a heresy. You're not saying you're Jesus. Well, in a way we are, because every human, every second order power has a personally tailored third order power of Christ that slips right over us and gives us all the power of the Christ. So suddenly it's not just me struggling against the Demiurge and, oh, I fail. You have to open up to the Christ. It's not, the Bible always says, Christ is a gentleman. He will not come without being asked. Well, okay. You do need to set your ego aside, and it's ego that stands in the way. I say that people who have their ego on the throne, they think that they are the be all and end all, as you mentioned with your beliefs, Lee. They think that they run the show. They will not bend the knee to any God or to Jesus or to Christ. Well, here's the thing. If you got this attitude, it's not going to serve you well in the end. You will eventually, and we're coming to the after death part soon. You will eventually have to. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, so there's an interesting observation made in fourth way studies, and that is one of the corruptions of this kind of like a Christ impulse or something higher, like some kind of self-perfection or self-perfecting aspect of us. One of the kind of corruptions or errors that manifests through the ego is this hero worship. Now, when I was younger, I was always confused as to why people would worship like celebrities, film stars, actors, sports and all of that stuff. It used to kind of really confuse me. But I always used to ask the question, where does it come from? Why do people feel the compulsion to have to worship other
Worship.
humans? Yeah. So when it was taught to me or explained to me at least that everybody has this knowing that there is some perfect or there's a higher version of themselves. There's a path of
Yes,
self-perfecting, but because it's almost the ego hijacks that function and redirects
exactly.
it into celebrity culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you see, we Gnostics call this world of ours the imitation or the deficiency because nothing you see here is quite as it should be. Because on the ethereal plane, there is no, moth nor rust, which doth corrupt. It says in the New Testament, there's no death and destruction in the ethereal plane. All good. And the basic function of the first order powers and of all beings who come from the Father is worship. In fact, the all does nothing but worship the Son, and the fullness of God worships the Father. That's
Yeah.
what they do. We're hardwired to worship. And if you have no connection with the Father or the ethereal plane, then you're going to worship the deficiency.
Yeah.
You're going to worship these other men, other humans, sports figures, whatever. By the way, my ego, my being a podcaster and a Gnostic author and whatnot, I say people worship people like Gurdjieff.
Yeah.
People worship people like Valentinus or Plato. What makes these Old Testament prophets any more of a prophet than, for example, me or you?
Sure. Yeah.
If we're in touch with the Father and we're bringing the truth from above, we are on a par with those people as long as we don't magnify ourselves. And what
Yeah.
happens in cults, of course, as we all know, cults magnify the leader of the cult. And
Cult of
this becomes
personality.
the probably, yes, well, and the cult leader. That's how you get, Jim Jones and the people killing themselves drinking the Kool-Aid and the people
Mm.
that were in San Diego that all killed themselves on the same day. They worship that particular leader as a cult figure who is saying he is from God or he is God, and they have to obey him. Or, there are some modern churches still that are very cult-like in
Yeah.
their teachings. So this is not true. And this is what the Catholic Church did, for almost 2,000 years. This is why they took the gnosis out of the Bible, so that
Mm.
we would worship the priests,
Yeah.
that we would confess our sins to the priest and pay priest money in order to forgive our sins. That is deficiency. That is imitation. Now, you were talking about the simulation. You know, the people that are trying to build a computer simulation, what is now being called the metaverse, I guess, I was using the term metaverse before it was co opted by the simulation folks, uh, because meta means going up. So I
Yeah.
was going up from the universe to the metaverse. But these computer oriented metaverse types, they are making an analogy between a computer simulation and what we are living in. That's all demiurgic. It's not from God.
Yeah.
Obviously, the computers, AI, that's all mud up stuff, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
not. It's not from the top down. It's not life.
Mm.
No. Nothing was impregnated and blossomed with the life and consciousness and love, and out came a computer. That's all built from men and the
Mm.
guidance of the demiurge. And by the way, we Gnostics believe that what are called demons in other religions are we call archons. They are what Freud called archetypes. You get the archon archetypes that Freud.
Yeah.
Uh, the archons are the evil or the entirely egoic personality of the fractals of logos. So
Mm.
they're archonic so there's different levels of the pleroma. Not everybody up there in the hierarchy of God is an angel, is an archangel, is a personality type. A lot of them are, elbows and knees, right? But okay, that was a weird thought, and it got me off track for a second. That's a funny thought. So the archons, there is an archon in charge of and attached to everything that people invent, every demiurgic level thing. So it can be used for good or evil. You can kill someone with an overdose of vitamin C, but then again, vitamin C is good for you. Or, atom splitting can make power free, clean power, but then again, it can blow up the world. So it's that never ending war. It's that balance between maybe God's will and the egoic will. But down here, the demiurge rules this world.
I think now could be a good time, because the term or the name Demiurge gets thrown around quite a bit, and I think there's a little bit there's quite a lot of confusion as to whether it's the Jehovah or the God below the God, or is the Demiurge substance? Is the Demiurge all and everything that is from materiality? So I think now would be a good time to define the Demiurge.
Okay, so well, you notice I very carefully did not define the Demiurge, because it's like the biggest blasphemy ball. It's the biggest no thing to say as far as trying to recruit Christians to be Christian Gnostics, which is basically my mission. The Demiurge could be equated to the God of the Old Testament. For the most part, the tribal God of Israel is probably the Demiurge. And that's a horrible thing to say, because we bring him forward into the New Testament. But then again, Yahweh and Jehovah aren't really mentioned in the New Testament. You know what is mentioned? The Father. Jesus said, I came not to point the way to myself or for me to be worshiped, came that you might worship the Father. Or he said, this is the one command, the only command that you need to do. Love the Father with all your heart and mind and soul, and then love your brother as yourself. That is the only commandment. That's it. And Jesus also said, if you see me, you see the Father that sent me. So Jesus, I believe, was talking about the God above all gods, the Gnostic God, the Father, all the way back there before the only begotten Son, and then the rollout. The Demiurge says, I am a jealous God. You shall have no God but me. Or he says, you have worshipped other gods. I am killing the firstborn of all your children. This is the kind of God he is in the Old Testament. He's a vengeful, wrathful, jealous, me kind of guy. He's entirely egoic. Now, that's in the histories, and that's in the stories of the Hebrews. I won't say that's necessarily true of the prophets, because I do think that in the darkness of their prayer closets, the prophets were probably in touch with the God above all gods. And a lot of the Psalms, the Proverbs, Jeremiah, some of these, some, not all, but most of the prophets were in touch with the God above all gods. So you have to read the Old Testament very carefully, which of course is taboo in the modern conventional church, because you're supposed to take everything that the Old Testament and the New Testament say as the literal truth. And it's inconsistent, and it drives many people away. Both the current and the conventional church, don't forget, was derived directly out of that Catholic church that killed the Gnostics, threw away the Gnosticism. And that's why these jugs were buried in the ground in Qumran, in Nag Hammadi. These scrolls were buried to protect them, not to protect us from heresy, but to protect the truth from the heresy of the Catholic Church. And I do have quite a few followers from my podcast who are fallen away Catholics, who love the Father, but are horrified by the church.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's as well they should be.
Yeah.
What do you
Well,
think? Does that make sense to you?
yeah, yes, completely, yes. And regarding the sort of burying of things. So, for instance, in the fourth way tradition, um, there's this talk about there's always this talk about future generations. So the work that we do
Yeah.
today is not actually entirely for us. It's actually for future generations, which could actually be our future self or future version of ourselves, or
Mm-hmm.
just future generations. And there's this idea that we can plant things or bury things, almost like a
Yeah.
breadcrumb trail, to act as a
Yeah.
reminder or a prompt. Now, I actually did maybe 3 or 4 years work with a particular occultist, and his specialty was identifying where these nuggets had been planted into popular culture,
Oh,
as in
yeah.
contemporary music, films, art.
Yeah.
So he was specialized in saying, you see what they've done there? They've inserted
Yeah.
a nugget that will be actually protected greater because it's popular culture, because the ego will actually protect it, not realizing
Right.
that it's transferring a little nugget to remind
Right.
somebody, it could be yourself in the future, um, to
I
remember
agree with you. In
to
fact,
look
there's all
upwards.
these and there's nuggets in the Bible too. There's Testament. It's just their meaning has been stripped. So once you learn the Gnostic gospel and then read the New Testament, now you understand so much more than is taught by the church, like the fullness of God. That expression, the fullness of God, is thrown around in the New Testament. And we take it to mean, oh, God is great and full. That isn't, the fullness is where the eons live. The fullness is paradise. And that puts a different slant on things.
Hmm.
By the way, the flip side of what you're saying, this is good. I like that nugget business. That's good. The flip side you're saying is when we talk about sociopathic and we talk about the ego running rampant and things getting worse and worse, these first person shooter games on the computer, and as the computer becomes more and more sophisticated, so now it's going to be in VR. Before long, it will be in implants. I'm
Yep.
sure of it.
Yep.
My first book, before I wrote even the simple explanation, is called Reality Crash, and it's about VR world implants and not being able to tell truth from falsity.
Hmm.
Reality Crash is also available out there, but
Yep.
it's 20 years old by now, so I could update the tech. Anyway, the and I see TV shows. You know, I do watch too much television, but I do not watch things that are soul killing, that are horrible. You know, there's so many. I see their teasers on the ads, but I don't go and watch them. But I do see the teasers, and the tease like this Dexter. You know, this new Dexter series that's coming out. It's horrible. It's teaching rampant sociopathy, and it's teaching it to vulnerable people who have no spiritual connection, who no one has taught or loved even. And these become the school shooters and so forth.
Hmm.
The random acts of violence are being taught by popular culture and video games.
So
There's no
this,
doubt,
so this,
right?
this type of sociopathic behavior would be against the golden rule. It's directly
Oh, yeah.
opposing the golden rule, yeah. So you don't care
Right.
what you do to others.
No, you don't care, and it's solipsistic. I'm sure these school shooters. It's a virus, and by the way, archons are viruses. There are mind viruses. You've heard that expression, the
Sure.
mind viruses. Those are archons that specialize in mind virus. But I also think that there's viruses attached to various kinds of technology, like
Yeah.
when your computer crashes, or like you were saying you've got a storm outside and you've
Yeah.
been getting some intermittent feed on your Wi-Fi. That's a virus messing with this interview.
Yeah.
So, and I used to get so mad at the computer. I used to like, you know how people get very upset with the computer if things aren't working right. And I used
Yeah.
to be like that. I used to just, you know, practically come to tears about the computer not working. Help me, tech support. Now that I realize it's an archon messing with me,
Yeah.
I can be as calm and happy as I am now, even while the thing's going on. I go, oh, you wily little archon, you ain't got the power. I've got the Christ. And I have that attitude towards it all. So I just do what needs to be done. And I always overcome. I eventually win.
Yeah.
God willing. So,
Well,
okay.
Talking. I was going to say, talking of winning, the tripartite tractate, does it have an end story? Is there a happy ending to all of this?
Yes, there is an happy ending. In the same way that Logos, the one of Logos, was called back into the fullness, it happens with each one of us. So Logos remembered the fullness, and the fullness was praying for him. And by the way, we have angels praying for us. You know, I've invited the Christ. The third order power is draped over all of my second order powers. But there are eons, the first order powers, that also have the same countenance as me. So there's Cyd Eon, and she's praying for me. She's my guardian angel. And my third order power, if I'm detached from it, it's my guardian angel standing right there, praying for me, trying to help me. Okay. Once I have accepted salvation, the Christ, the third order powers coming into me and showing me the way. You have to be willing to take your ego off the throne. It's the first thing you do. Do that. Then when you pass away, you're merely separating that material demiurgic part, and your soul or your spirit, your one and your ego, they are now free, and they go right on up. They return home to the fullness of God. They go through some steps first, if I haven't. And shall we talk about that now? Shall we talk about the after-death experience?
Yeah, I think
okay.
It'll be good, yeah.
It's a good time. Okay, so before I read the Gnostic Gospels, and even before I wrote the Simple Explanation of Everything, I studied yoga for many years, and the Self-Realization Fellowship, and Paramahansa Yogananda. I studied Tibetan Buddhism and the Bardo Thodal, which is called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is how we know it. So I learned some other religious traditions other than Christianity, but I've been a born-again Christian since I was 5, like I said. So I've been very spiritually oriented the whole way, always looking for the Father, the God above all gods, or not looking for as in searching, but feeling the love of. I just didn't have that word, that Gnostic frame. Well, I noticed when reading the Book of the Dead that there are these various levels of death called the Bardos. There's 14 layers of what Catholics might call purgatory. This stuff isn't in the Bible, though, but 14 levels of Bardos. And if you have been a good Buddhist, and you have been praying and doing your prayers and communing with the God above all gods and listening to the teachings of your priest and whatnot, it is believed by the Tibetan Buddhists that you will go into the first Bardo and be immediately translated to heaven. You will immediately rejoin the one. If you've got loved ones down here, maybe you're a mother or a grandparent, and you don't quite want to leave the little kiddies right yet, then you're going to make it back. You don't want to leave. It's you're holding yourself back. So you're attached. That's what attachment means. Yeah. You're attached to something in the world. So you're going to have to go through 2 or 3 different Bardo levels before you realize that the attachments, that God will take care of everything, and the attachments let go. And then you go back up and you rejoin the one. Now, if you're attached to material things or egoic things, then you are not willing to let go of the attachment, just like you weren't in life. I don't need the Christ. Go away, you do-gooder. Well, then after death, you're going to remain attached. And then something's got to shake you loose from the attachment. And the Bardos get more and more horrific. Now, this isn't Gnosticism. This is Tibetan Buddhism. So don't get confused. The Bardos get more and more horrific, horrible. But the way out of each Bardo, even down there at Bardo 2, Bardo 3, Bardo 4, Bardo 6, and all the way up to 14, the only way to escape the Bardo is to go onward and upward. Going onward is moving forward. It's not looking back with regret and attachment. That's what going forward means. The past is past. History is history. You are here now. Be here now. If you go forward and look upward to God, then you will be progressing on the spiritual path rather than the material path. If you're continually looking backward or right here, right now, then you are only looking for wealth, popularity, and power here. And material possessions, but they never provide happiness. They are not fulfilling. It's a bottomless pit. There's more and more, right?
Yeah.
But the way out of each, it was said in slightly different terms in the Bardo Thadal, but the gist of it is onward and upward. Oh, and by the way, I think there's a big understanding going around right now about the trap. There's this thing that's being taught called the trap. And someone's teaching that if you see the light, that's the trap. Go back. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped. It's the opposite. That is a lie of the Demiurge trying to keep you from going onward and upward and wanting you to go back and down. So beware if you read a book called The Trap. It's the inverse of truth, and it's a lie. Okay.
Literally, just
so onward and upward.
Literally, just as you were saying this, I got a message saying the internet is unstable. So the Archons obviously don't want you to articulate this.
Be teaching this particular thing. Keep going until we get connected. Okay. Yeah. Nah. All right. So the of the Bardo Thadal is always onward and upward. So we're supposed to go forward in hope. Hope is a forward thing, right? Regret is a backward thing.
Yeah.
So onward and then upward to rejoin the fullness, to go back up. And this is why I end every one of my podcasts with onward and upward, because I want to remind people to go onward and upward. And I tell the story of a friend of mine who was an atheist, and she was on her deathbed. She was dying an atheist. She didn't want to hear about God. And by the way, she was a fallen Catholic. And so it was the church and her parochial school had driven her to be atheist. So I had to get the message across to her, though, because I didn't want her to have one of these terrible Bardo experiences.
Yeah.
And she used to be a surfer. And so I told her, soon you're going to be tumbling in the ocean. You're going to be, you caught a wave and you've gone under and you're tumbling and you're not sure which way is up and which way is down or how to get out of this mess. Go up, go onward and up. Don't go down, go to the light, go to where you see the light above the water. And I think is just as effective for someone who is an atheist to think that way, because now getting beyond the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And you saw talking about this on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, and I stopped the story there. But then my brother, who is my partner in crime, my brother is 10 years older than me, and he is also a retired professor. He is a philosopher, PhD in philosophy.
Yep.
He corrected me. He wanted me to say, I don't want you to give the idea that go through these axe-wielding deities. There's no deities in the Bardos. Those are not really deities. The Tibetans call them deities. We would call them archons. They're archons. The reason the Tibetans think of them as helpful deities and wrathful deities is because literally when you're dying, a Tibetan Buddhist will sit by your side and whisper into your ear, read the entire Book of the Dead to you.
Yeah.
Over and over again for a couple of weeks. They don't bury the body for a couple of weeks or burn the body, whatever they do. They read that to you. So they're putting these images in your mind of all these axe-wielding deities. And, they're putting these memes, we would call them, units of information are called memes.
Yeah.
They're putting these memes in their mind. That's why they've got all these particular horrific, hellish experiences that they're going through, because that's their teaching. But we haven't been taught that. So for us, our memes are angels, expectations of heaven, loved ones who have passed away greeting us, the long tunnel with the light at the end. These are our Western version of those Bardos. And as long as we keep going toward the light and upward toward love, you don't want to scramble backwards. If you're scrambling backwards, no, I don't want to die. And you are for sure going to be readed, and you're going to be here again trying to learn the lesson. But the lesson isn't how do I become perfect or how do I become enlightened, because none of us ever reach that state. The lesson is, Lord Jesus, help me. The lesson is allowing the Christ to put its overlay upon you so that you can be redeemed. And the next time you'll go straight up.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I'm teaching.
Yeah. And what about near-death experiences? I did a little bit of research into it, and there just seem to be a lot of, there's definitely some patterns to it.
Yes.
Which would probably mean that there's something in the near-death experience of returning back. Do you want to talk a little bit about the near-death experience?
Yes, I would love to. YouTube has a lot of videos and different channels that specialize in the near-death experience. I think they're very true. I like them a lot. Most of them, not all, but most of them. Only a few of them seem to have these hellish type experiences. And doesn't it seem as though those hellish experiences come from their expectation of punishment? Have you noticed that as one of the patterns, Lee?
Yeah.
Have an experience of judgment and hellfire and this kind of thing because that's what they were taught.
Mm-hmm.
There are other entities up.
Yep, the internet's buffering.
We collaborate at the transpersonal space, perhaps without realizing it. And I think it's a lot more permeable to input from above, probably from logos, than it is down here on the world where we're blinded by the material. We're literally blinded by the material space that we're living in, right? You can't see through the wall. I can't see my cat up there anymore on the cat tree. In the ethereal space, you can see everything, everything. You can go anywhere. You fly, everybody. All of your loved ones are there. And the overwhelming sense that people have, most everybody, is love. Love. The initial reaction upon death is not pain or anguish. It's love. You're awash in love, and you're being transported along at supersonic speeds into this bright realm. And there's beautiful things there, butterflies and beautiful things, angels, and then your loved ones. And I asked my brother, do you think that those are projections of our death experience, our projections of our psychological experience? Because, by the way, I'm a psychology major and a counselor, and I used to think that my brother's thoughts about this in-between place was a metaphor where psychological mechanisms are occurring, even if you're brain dead or on life support in a coma. But now I think it's a real place. I with them now. I finally came on board, and it's been like 30 years of him talking with me like this, and me resisting. The personal space is also called the in-between place. And by the way, my brother is a hypnotherapist, and he does past life regression. So he is intimately familiar with he's a professor emeritus of philosophy. And after he left academia, he became a psychotherapist through hypnosis. People do encounter their dead loved ones. They're not encountering their live loved ones. Mm-hmm. It's not their little kids running around that are still back there that they might want to go home to. It's the ones that didn't make it. It's the ones that died before you.
Yeah.
Even aborted children are up there because they were all second order powers before they were killed. But there's no guilt or recrimination coming from any of them. It's all love. Now, if a person has a hellish experience, it's their own. Have you seen that 360-degree life review in those near-death experiences? Have you seen any of those videos, Lee? Okay.
Yeah.
So the deal is, right? You're like, we all know, popular culture says we have this expectation that our life passes before our eyes. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not like watching a movie. It's more like you're reliving that experience and your life, but you're no longer a monad within this one narrow point of view, feeling what I know, knowing what I know. Mm-hmm. You are in everyone's point of view. You have become this larger, it's probably that golden rule cycle. You become a larger unit, and you're laying up to, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that every insult, every slight, every horrid thing, or if you're a murderer, every murder, whatever you've done, that you would now, with your eyes wide open and being confronted with no possibility of escaping realization. It is realization because you're experiencing it from their point of view.
Yeah, I call it perceptions with perspective.
Okay. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Did you come up with that?
Yeah, through some of my own personal experiences, through deep states of meditation. And my group, by the way, it's called the Omnipresent Group, which we call it the Omnipresent Platform. So there is a certain state that you can get to, very similar to forms of remote viewing or remote perceptions. So rather than only perceiving local perceptions, we can actually perceive non-local and 360.
Wow.
But yeah, so
that is very neat.
Yeah, so the whole concept, or the whole idea of us being very limited within our physical planetary body is it's like a prison. But there are other forms of perception with greater than the five senses. And when we leave this demiurgic or planetary body, we then have full capacity to perceive, and that equally means perceiving from other people's perspective of us. It's a bit of a mind bender,
isn't it? Yeah, it's a mind bender. It's very cool, and some of that can happen during hypnosis with a good hypnotist if that's where you're being led to do. Exactly. So that is when people come to their full enlightenment, and their full realization is finally, either before death or after death, accepting your role in this existence, in this planetary, and getting past it, letting it go, being remorseful. And in religious talk, that's called, you've got redemption and repentance. That's called repentance. And it is, you have to repent before you can be redeemed. And so that's either going to happen on your while you're living, and you're living a good, enlightened, helpful life full of the golden rule, reaching out to others. What can I do for you? How can we build? How can we build together? Or it's on your deathbed where you repent and you ask for forgiveness, and suddenly you're infused with the Holy Spirit, so your transition is easier. Or it's after you've gone through this, I still call Bardo experience,
Mm.
and
Um,
have your life view and let go.
yeah. Regarding Gurdjieff's conclusion that our purpose in the end of everything, our purpose is that we are some kind of apparatus or organism to produce remorse.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Well,
Yeah.
you have remorse before you can be redeemed, but I don't think that's the goal.
Mm.
I think the remorse comes because we suddenly remember and we feel bad that we forgot.
Well, I think he meant in reference to what we can sort of like our ambition within the planetary body is that we actually become, or if we fail to produce remorse, then we haven't produced anything.
Right.
Our ability to have redemption, to repent, to have remorse of conscience. In fact, it's the conscience that is missing, which is, if you think about it, when we have problems with our conscience, it's because we've gone directly against the law of unity, the golden rule.
Yes.
We've done
Yes.
unto
And
others what we wouldn't want done to ourselves.
when we go through that remorse and that repentance, the process of realization of the pain that we've caused, we have to realize it's not God punishing us. Nobody is hurting us. God is not exacting revenge or punishment onto us. It's us feeling the remorse that you speak of.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's all self-engendered
yeah.
on all sides. It's all self-engendered. So yeah, it's the remorse. And then we either come back, and I think we have a choice in that, or we go on. Oh, and one more thing. The Buddhists have us disappearing into the one, but it is not Gnostic to think that our our self disappears. We will not be absorbed back into the one with no knowledge of ourselves, because in the as above, so below analogies, even the eons have egos. Those eons are sitting where they chose for themselves. They've got their names, positions, places, duties, ranks.
Hmm.
So we are also going to retain ourselves. That is why when we do have those between life experiences, we recognize our loved ones. They recognize us, we recognize them. I'm waiting for I'm going to first ones I want to see are my pets. I want to reunite with my pack of dogs and cats. That's who I'm looking forward to seeing most. And then
Hmm.
maybe we'll get around to the relatives. But
So
so
this
we
would
don't
be
lose ourselves.
could this be seen as the true ego or the real ego or the permanent I?
Yes, yes, yes. That's the ego without the imitation and deficiency deluding us into the bad ego. Our true ego is who we are and who we belong. And that is our aeonic inheritance. We are fractals of Logos, who himself was a fractal of the eons. And each of the eons has its own personality, talents, capabilities,
Hmm.
job to do. And each of us is a amalgamation of these and that and those eons.
Hmm.
Not all eons are the same. Not all people are the same. Not all of Logos's fractals are the same. Not all second order powers are the same. None of that. We're all individual consciousness being expressed by various combinations of this infinite panoply of eons. There, I think I'm done. I think I've said everything, unless they have more questions.
Well, we've been going for quite a while now, so let's have a look. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up. Um, but you're definitely invited to come back for a part two. Maybe we can go into one particular area or aspect of Gnosticism, and we can go a bit deeper into one part or two parts. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up for today. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been great, and it's really good for everybody that's listening to this to get to know Gnosticism, because I'm sure there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misunderstandings about it. So, and I think you've done a really good job in delivering that and simplifying it in many ways. But also, you've also kind of given a taste to
That's what I
the
do.
deeper
That's why my
aspects of
books
it.
are called Simple.
Yeah. So, do you want to plug your website or links or anything like that? I will put them in the show notes and description, but if you want to plug yourself, then feel free.
I would. I will look right at the camera. I will appeal to the audience. My podcast is called GnosticInsights.com, or Gnostic Insights is the name of the podcast. And my homepage is GnosticInsights.com, and all of the podcast episodes are there. I could have done this as like a master class, but I don't believe in charging money for enlightenment. So I don't have paywalls either at my podcast or at my website. I don't charge for master classes, but I do have a like a 20 episode master class on the basics of Gnosticism, free.
Hmm.
And uh, I also have a Substack where I don't charge. Everything is free for the Substack. So please come and join me. We need you. I would like to spread this Gnostic gospel. I feel as though I am called to do so. But as Lee said, it might be for future generations. I did plant a time capsule with my books inside a few weeks ago underneath a house that was being built. So when that house falls down in some future day, maybe someone will dig up my books and read them.
Excellent.
Onward and upward.
Onward and upward. Yeah. Okay. On that note, once again, just want to thank you again, and we'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.